All right, so today we're going to start looking at the beginning of World War One, what led to the war, some of the causes, and then also what, in the end, led the United States to enter into the war and get involved. So, if we talk about World War One, initially, when you look at the world and the different continents, this war was fought. It started in Europe, and eventually, it had impacted so many countries that we had countries from all across the world gathering in Europe to fight throughout the several year time span. And so it truly was a world war with all the countries that were eventually involved in this fighting. Even the countries that really didn't have a military built up were able to send their support or maybe a very limited amount of troops to help fight. And so here's Europe here, just a map of the different countries. And so we have Russia with apparently a huge bear. These are not drawn to scale, but you have some of the main countries here: Germany, France, we have Italy, Great Britain, all of these countries. And then we have Turkey, which these countries over here initially were called the Ottoman Empire. Eventually it was called Turkey. But we have Europe here, and not all of these countries got along. Okay, they were on teams essentially. And so if we look at this, there's a lot going on in Europe. It's the years 1914, and Austria-Hungary, which you could see right here, was in control of land that another country, Serbia, right here, believed that it owned. So they argued over this land. There was tensions involved for sure. And then what happened was on June 28, 1914, a Serbian spy, a Serbian nationalist, someone who was very supportive of their country, this person assassinated Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary. So basically, the heir to the throne of Austria-Hungary was sadly killed. And so this assassination really started things moving in the direction of not just a war with two countries, but a world war. And so this shot started the war in a lot of ways. This couple, it's interesting how this happened. The couple was touring in a city when this spy, the Serbian nationalist, threw a bomb in their car. And actually, that didn't kill them. The bomb actually rolled out and ended up injuring some people in the crowd, but it didn't work. It didn't kill their target. But later on, the car actually turned into a spot where the Serbian spy actually was just standing. And so they took that opportunity to shoot Franz Ferdinand and his wife, and they were sadly killed, which obviously the tensions between Serbia and Austria-Hungary elevated to a new higher level. And so the Archduke's murder caused Austria-Hungary to declare war on Serbia. And so you could see these newspaper headlines. Austria-Hungary decides that war is their option. And so that's certainly not a world war. It's just Austria-Hungary and Serbia, at least at first. But here's what's going on. When you talk about Europe and really throughout the world, what was happening a lot were alliances, where countries basically said, we've got your back. If somebody attacks you, we've got your back, and we will fight with you and for you and be on your side as long as you would do the same in return. And so a lot of that was happening. So it didn't take long for basically dominoes, the domino effect of many countries getting involved here. So if you look at the different sides, there's the Allies and the Central Powers. And so initially it just started with Serbia and then Austria-Hungary. Austria-Hungary was on the side of the countries eventually called the Central Powers. You have Russia that was in an alliance with Serbia. So they were on their side. So we said, whoa, 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 we've got your back, Serbia. We're going to declare war on Austria-Hungary if they're declaring war on you. France would get involved. Belgium, Great Britain. These countries all formed a strong alliance on the Allies side, but then we also have Italy that would be in to some degree. And what's interesting is to see what happens with Italy later on and leading up into World War II. The Central Powers, Germany was a huge player in this game, where you have Germany that came to the side of Austria-Hungary because they had an alliance, they had a partnership and a deal. And then also something called the Ottoman Empire, which was Turkey, the country that eventually would be called Turkey, and a few other areas of land. And then Bulgaria also was involved. So there you have the two sides. You do need to be familiar with, those two sets of countries, but we'll talk more about that moving forward. And so the US obviously is not in Europe and was not involved. You have a whole ocean in between separating us from all of these tensions and war. And so our president at the time, Woodrow Wilson, said, well, we're just going to stay out of this. We're going to remain neutral. This is not our war to fight. And we want to stay isolated. We want to stay on our own by ourselves. That's called isolationism. They felt like Woodrow Wilson and our government felt like, okay, our best bet right now is to stay out of this. Okay. And so we did have a side that we were supporting. And so even though there was an ocean in between, the US helped the Allied powers by sending these ships, these merchant ships of food and supplies to Europe in the places that needed it. And so the US also helped block food from going to Germany. And so we did get involved, but we're not sending troops and fighting at this point. This was our way of kind of choosing sides and offering our support. However, Germany had developed these U-boats, basically underwater boats, similar to what eventually would be submarines. These U-boats began sinking ships in the Atlantic Ocean. It basically said, we will not allow ships in this area. Now, the ocean is not something that can be claimed necessarily, but Germany was saying, stay out of these waters. They were trying to keep these supplies from reaching Great Britain and then heading into the countries that they were fighting against. What happened that was huge was not just these little merchant ships, but the Lusitania, this huge ship, was shot down. May 7, 1915, a German submarine shot a torpedo, sank. It's a British passenger ship, had over almost 1,200 people that died, and 128 of them were Americans. And that was not okay with us, obviously. At that point, that was the tipping point where we said, all right, it looks like we're going to be getting involved here pretty soon. And so if you see the Lusitania, it's similar to what a cruise ship would be like today. That was primarily just for passengers. Now, Germans did sink the ship because they thought that there were weapons being hidden on the board, and the U.S. did hide weapons on these passenger ships that were going to Great Britain. And so Germany had warned them and said that they would shoot them down and sink them. And so eventually, after several other merchant ships were sunk and destroyed, the United States said, all right, enough is enough. That is something where we know this is involving us, even though it's on the other side of the ocean. We need to get involved, especially with these merchant ships being sunk and the Lusitania. You have over 100 Americans killed, 1,200 people in the Lusitania. And so the U.S. joined on the side of the Allied powers. And so you can see the two sides, the Central Powers, Austria-Hungary, Ottoman Empire, Bulgaria, Germany. That is the Central Powers. And then on our side here, the United States, we were siding with Great Britain, Italy and France, Serbia, and that is where the war starts at this point because of these alliances. One country declares war on another, but everybody's involved. And so in the end, it turns into people just choosing teams and fighting this battle. So we will study World War I and what happens next.